All right, we're live now. Put your camera on.
No.
I just tested it on.
Okay. Hold on. All right. So start my video.
So I got to show you how I did it. We're live now.
My camera is facing the wrong way. Okay. Hold on. All right. So start my video.
You get your camera the other way.
Yeah, why is my camera facing the wrong way? My camera is facing the wrong way. Okay, hold on. Okay.
You get your camera the other way.
Yeah, why is my camera facing the wrong way? My camera is facing
And both of us are on, so
hold on.
you got to mute.
Okay. Which one am I muting?
You got to mute one of your Zooms.
Which one?
Look on your Zoom.
Okay, hold on.
There you go. Then it stopped.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, clear.
Okay. So
you got to just show your face though.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Hold on. Boy, this is like major stuff right here.
All righty.
Okay.
So I got to show you how I did that afterwards.
I'm frozen. Okay. So
okay. And I'm going to drop it on LinkedIn real quick and then
wait, hold on, because I'm getting some serious lag. Are you getting lag on YouTube? Which one are you looking at? Are you looking at YouTube or are you looking at Zoom?
I'm looking at Zoom.
Okay, well, let me look at Zoom because YouTube is lagging seriously and I can't understand what's going on there. So I'm just going to stop looking at that.
Yeah, don't look at that. That's just, I just put it on mute and then just, you know.
Okay. All right, then I think we're good. Okay, so now I can sit back some. Woo, all right. Yeah, you're gonna have to show me how in the world you did that because I don't know if it was the order that we came in on or what.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. So wait a second. If we do the chatting on here, if we're not looking at YouTube, how are we going to see when people say something on the chat?
Well, I'm looking at YouTube.
Okay, well, okay, so we have to look at both then.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's fine.
All right, we're good then.
Because I could, in the actual administration part, I could actually say something. I don't even have to be on the YouTube page. The admin side, you know, I could test like that. I'll show it to you later, but
okay. All right. Oh wait, there it is. I saw the test. You just did that.
Yeah. You see that?
You did that from Zoom?
No, I did that from YouTube.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I can see how to do it from YouTube. Yeah. But I thought you were saying you could do it in Zoom and it would go over to YouTube, but no.
No.
Okay. All right. So let's just go ahead and get started then, because as I said, I knew it was going to take a minute to get everything going.
Yeah. So.
Oh, yes. I don't know. I
don't
understand what's going on. There's another window now. Why did you put the Zoom link? You were supposed to put the YouTube link.
What do you mean? It's the YouTube link.
Then
the
why is there
link,
another window open in Zoom?
let me see. Hold on. Hey, hey, Taiwo. Yeah, that's actually YouTube. So when people come on,
Oh, so it
yeah,
shows who that is right there on the
right,
screen.
right. And our
Oh,
faces will show like that.
oh, okay.
So
Okay.
Taiwo, Kayende. All right, yeah. So we're just getting started. Sorry for the small delay here.
Small.
We're the small delay. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is BA Shop Talk Live, and we're going live here. And the topic that we're covering for today in this live stream is interviewing, how to get the stakeholders to pour their hearts out. And I know this is probably Annette's favorite, technique to use as it concerns business analysis. Actually, is mine too. I'm not gonna lie. And just as a high level overview, I wanted to give us a definition of what interviewing is as it pertains to the BABOK. And the definition out of the BABOK says that an interview is a systematic approach designed to elicit business analysis information from the person or group of people by talking to interviewees, asking relevant questions, and documenting the responses. So with that being said, opening up just for that definition, we want to, dive right into it. And Annette, you want to start off with this first part, and I think this is the active listening we should cover. And the reason why I say we should cover active listening, because there's some things that we do for our pre-interview planning. We're not going to go into like major detail, but you have to understand the time, the stakeholders, the skills, as it pertains to how to dig into questions once they start talking, or in this case, pouring their hearts out, the cultural concerns, consistency, how to give your introduction when you're talking about an initiative or a project, and setting up that interview and how long, and time boxing that, and just preparing your questions. And if you're talking about an initiative, just as a caveat, you may want to like prepare your questions before you go to the interview. I normally do not send out my interview questions, and the reason being is because you don't want them to act it out and have it already rehearsed. You want that, on that one-on-one intimate feel and that on-demand response. So with that being said, when you're conducting the interview, there are some skills that you have to have, and active listening is one of them, right? And with the active listening skills, when you go into an interview, it's always good to have another, BA there, or somebody from your team who could help support you or take notes, right? Because not everyone is skilled in taking notes and active listening at the same time, right? That, is, I wouldn't recommend the practice, but if
I
you
don't think
can,
it's possible.
yeah, because I
I don't
tried,
think it's possible. That's
go
my
ahead.
opinion. You cannot engage in active listening and take notes at the same time. You can't.
All right, and why do you say that?
Because active listening is more than just listening for it's more than just listening for phrases or listening for the answer to the question that you asked. Active listening requires some reading between the lines. Active listening requires you to listen for the things that are not said, or for the things that someone is trying to go around. Or if you hear that, somebody might be trying to be extremely correct, or
Mhm.
extremely careful in what they're saying, there may be something additional there. And that might be something you need to dig into. So you can't do all of that while writing down extreme notes. The only thing I would say you need to write down in active listening is if you hear a key word, but you don't want to interrupt your speaker, or you don't want to interrupt the person who's talking, but you want to ask a question about that thing that you heard once they finish speaking, you can quickly write down or jot down a word or two that will jog your memory so that by the time they get finished talking, you will not have forgotten what was said. So that's the only time that I recommend writing anything down when you're listening to people in the interview.
Yeah, and you're right. And let me tell Taiwo, feel free to ask questions
Yeah.
at any time,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so so by the way, everyone, you can ask questions and we'll be able to see it, regardless of
In the chat.
in the chat room. If you're
Yeah.
doing it from the YouTube channel, we can see it,
Mm-hmm.
on our screen as well. So yeah, and that is a definite, must have when you're going into this sometimes. And I'm just giving you a past situation. Like if I don't have that support, and I need to record it, then you can ask the stakeholder, can we record this for the purpose of documenting these requirements or information, business analysis information for this initiative. And I'm just going to give out, a key gem to some of you to understand. If you do have that option, I would use a website called Otter. That's
Okay, hold on,
ATT.
Tony. Hold on. Back up. Wait a minute. Back up. Back up. So let me recap to understand where we're going. Okay, so you were saying that when we interview, there's two major parts. We got active listening, right? And we've got the asking of the questions. You were talking about how before we start the interview, there is a whole process, a pre-interview process a lot of people go through, which involves several different things, but we're not going to discuss that today, really. Right. We were talking, you said you wanted to discuss active listening first because active listening is a huge part, it's probably the biggest part of the interviewing process, right? And then you were mentioning that when you actually perform the interview, you might want to actually record it. That's what you were saying, right?
If you don't have that support.
If you don't have the support of a note taker.
Yeah, because it's hard to ask questions and actively listen at the same time when you are like engaged into the conversation. Okay. You don't want to be that person that says, okay, and I'm getting my pen here.
No, we don't want to be that person. I find that to be extremely disruptive. I find it to be disruptive in the whole, it just kind of disrupts the flow. Now everybody has to stop and wait for you to write all that stuff out, and then you're just pretty much sitting in dead air. I don't really like that. But let's get to the part where we are encouraging the free flow of information, or encouraging information, or encouraging people to say things that will actually provide value to the event in which we are all participating at the time. So when you ask questions to your stakeholders, we already know, from basic BA training, ask open-ended questions. We get that, okay? Give me some examples of those open-ended questions that you have found that get the stakeholders to actually start pouring out, all kinds of information.
Okay. So first, before I answer that question, I always got to have my, before you do that, the what I try to do is have all of my questions, written out and structured as it pertains who I'm dealing with, like the stakeholder. Like, so if I'm dealing with a VP, there's specific questions. And if it's about the initiative, as structured and sequential questions about each one. And before I give you the opening of the example, I'm just covering my pre. um, and and if I know who I'm interviewing, regardless if it's a VP down to a frontline manager that's dealing with the people who do the work every day, I have certain questions that I only ask those individuals because and you and I both know the VPs, most VPs don't understand the detailed work that goes into the tactical part of doing the everyday work, like the frontline workers. So I can't ask them those questions, but strategic questions, I can ask them for an example. So if for instance, I'm giving them like one of my basic questions, it would be, what are your key business objectives, for instance? And then they would, that's an open-ended question. I'm not asking them yes or no question. I'm asking them, what are those key business objectives for your area of the business? And
well,
so,
here's a question I have about that.
What's
their definition of objective?
Yeah,
because some people equate objectives with goals. Some people equate objectives with the mission. Everybody does not use that word appropriately. Let me not say appropriately. I'm gonna walk that back. Everybody does not use that word the same way. So when
reframe it. What sometimes
we can absolutely reframe it.
Individuals, I spoke with individuals that literally, even though I said it and it sounds clear to me, don't assume that they understand what you're talking about. What are some of your key business objectives? Like, what is your department? What is it that your department? What would they do? So if you're trying to understand that specific department. Okay, what is the objective of the work that you do, or because we're in this initiative or project, what is it that the goal or objective for this department? Or our key objective is to process claims fast and to ensure our accuracy of our information is being disseminated amongst our our partners. I'm just making up something, but those are those key objectives that drive that business, right?
Well, you were saying that, I see Ty Will saying that he thinks it depends on the environment and the type of project, and I agree. The questions do need to be sort of they need to take into consideration the environment and the type of project. So Tony, when you were saying that you have specific questions for different people, that makes a lot of sense, because why would you, like you said, ask a VP or something what the standard operating procedure is for a specific work process? You would ask them about that because they don't know. So we don't need to ask them those types of questions. We need to ask people the types of questions that, number one, they would have answers to, but more importantly, because there are some people high up who make it their business to know. But more importantly, we want to understand what the value is at the different levels, because we want to make sure that we have a holistic view of what's going on. That's like the BA's job. We try to make sure that we have a holistic view of what's going on. So asking those questions to different people and asking them in different ways is really, really important. So let's get to some specific questions that will make people actually tell you some stuff. Go ahead,
So,
give me an example.
so another one that I often ask is, especially for VPs, they you know, they'll deep dive into this one, is what are your weaknesses? And it seems very, you know, vague. And but if you ask, what are your weaknesses in your department, you know, and how, you know, how are you, you know, measuring, like measurement questions, they usually have those reports that, you know, are sent to them, and they can kind of discuss like on a high
Right.
level what that is, right? So,
Right.
and so the question again, what will be the greatest weaknesses in your area of the business? Very general,
Yeah.
but some of the answers that I've seen in the past would be because there's a lot of back and forth, or the process is not, you know, they may say some processes may be redundant because they know some information, right? But they just don't know the details. And we are successful in spite of ourselves, even though we have all these issues, but we're still successful, but we haven't fixed none of it.
Right.
You know, that's those are the weaknesses. And then, like, say if you go to more of a departmental, like you go moving, and slow me down if I'm going too fast, and I know you usually do, but if you're going to departmental, then you're talking to like the either VP or director, and you want to ask about, well, what are the roles that, you know, and the responsibilities in this department. What carries this department as far as those roles?
Right.
Oh, well, we have a you know, a coordinator, we have a business IT business analyst, a reporting person, blah blah blah, and several managers doing this, that, and the third, and they'll give you the org chart on a high level of how the structure and the responsibilities that match it. So,
Well,
uh,
I find that it's interesting that a lot of them do pull out the org chart, but the org chart doesn't necessarily provide much value. Not in my opinion, it doesn't. It does not provide much value. Here's a better question. What I find out, here's a better question. Instead of saying, you know, or instead of them, or when they try to give you the answer of, well, this is so-and-so and this is so-and-so, here's my question. The output that your department or your, you know, your area, whatever that output is in your area, how does that output feed into other places? And why is it important to other people? Are you the final stop of the output? Like, is this it? Or does the information that comes out of your area go somewhere else? And how important is that to those people? Is it mission critical for them? Is it something that's nice to have? Is it, you know, if your area got sucked up into a tornado tomorrow, everybody be like, it bothers us a little bit, but we'll be okay. You know, how does that work? So asking people that question usually gets them to start giving you information about how, what that area is or it gets them to tell you how that area is connected to the other areas, okay, and where they see those connections at. Now, what's funny is a lot of times they'll tell you that there are some connections that are actually not on that org chart.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that's why I'm saying that, to me, most of the time the org chart is not all that valuable, because you'll find that there are a bunch of dotted lines, as we say, to all kinds of different places that are not necessarily represented on that org chart.
That's true. And I'm glad you said that, because what comes with that is this, is that at times when you're discussing with them, okay, what are the roles and responsibilities? They'll say, oh yeah, we have this, and this, such and such does this in our department. Do you have an org chart, or do you have the job descriptions for each one of these roles, so you can understand exactly what they do? Or maybe, in often cases, we don't know what he does, but here's the title.
Yes, sometimes that happens.
Have you ever had that happen?
Yes, absolutely. We don't really know what this person's job is. We just know what they do. I've seen that happen. Like this same person has been sitting in this chair for 15 years, longer than everybody else. And they come in every day and do what they do, but nobody's really sure if that's what they should be doing, or or if there are additional things that they should be doing, or if there are things that they're doing that they need to stop doing. Nobody's really sure.
And this is where you need to come with your active listening skills. As you conduct more interviews, you have to pay close attention to those type of stakeholders that give you this type of information, because if they're unclear with it, then you got to follow up on anything as a BA if something's unclear, right? So, or where can I get this information, right? Or let me talk to the person, and then the person can actually give you their job duties. And sometimes they're doing things that are not a part of their job description or their job, what you would consider their job duties.
Because sometimes they're doing things that are redundant in other departments. Sometimes they're doing things that other people should be doing, and that job, whatever that task that they're doing, really should not be in their lap. Sometimes I've seen that a lot of times, where specific people are making decisions that those people really should not be making those decisions. Those decisions should be made somewhere else. But because they like making those decisions, they don't necessarily want people to know that. And so they keep that kind of thing up, under wraps. Here's another question, Tony, that's really good to get people to tell you what's going on. Ask people where their bottlenecks are. Like, that's what I do. I ask people where their bottlenecks are. It's like, okay, so you have this.
What's a bottleneck? Tell us what a bottleneck is.
The bottleneck is, where does everything come to a screeching halt? Because if it doesn't get through this place, it can't move anywhere else. There's nowhere else for it to go. So sometimes the bottleneck is staffing. We all know about the staffing bottleneck, right? There's not enough people to do this process, and so everything comes to a screeching halt. Then you have the bottleneck where you have a single point of failure, right? There is only one specific person who can do this job, or there's only one specific system that can do this job, and that system is down half the time. Something like that. So when you ask people about what their bottlenecks are, that will generally get them to tell you all kinds of stuff too, because bottlenecks are painful. Okay. That to me is a great question. Because people usually have an idea in their mind. They have some opinion as to what is causing the bottleneck. Okay.
Right.
It could be a person, it could be a process, it could be all kinds of things, but people have opinions as to what the root cause, you love root cause, as to what the root cause of the bottleneck is, right? And they will tell you, because that bottleneck causes them some pain. So that's another question. Oh, see, Taiwo likes my question. Yes.
Look.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great,
Annette
great
is known for asking some very good questions. Look, let me just side note, like, like early on in Annette and I, coming together, uh, we came together off of the premise of I knew that she was great at working with the students or that we were coaching, and she will be act as that stakeholder, and she will allow them to ask questions, but then she'll ask a question back, and I used to love it because he used to throw the students for a spin. But this
Yeah.
is side note. I'm just saying she's the queen of questions.
Yeah, I am pretty much the queen of questions. It becomes a source of annoyance for some people, but that's okay because
I like
because
you
it's what I'm good at.
define the requirements, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's a great question. And of course you can take it in all kind of different directions, but if you ask that bottleneck question, people are going to be running to tell you stuff about what's going on. So that's a good one. So what's
So,
another good question that you have, Tony?
like, say if we are working on an initiative that's a process improvement, like we got, like I work in the capacity where, in the business process management, right? So I have to understand like what is the current state of this process, and what are your key processes? So I would ask a question to some of these stakeholders that what are your key processes in your group or your department, and uh, how do you, you know, how you asked in the beginning, like what is your input and your output, and what are your must-haves, so to speak, in these key process, So those are two things. What are your
Hmm.
key processes to the department? And then what
Hmm.
are your must-haves?
Hmm.
Like what has to run in order for what has to, flow or be working in order for your department to, be functional.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that kind of runs into the other part where I was saying the output of a specific area, like what, if your area produces this output, then where does it go? What would happen if one day your area did not produce the output that it produced? Who would be affected, and how would they be affected? you
Mm.
know would some part of the company just shut down, right? Would some part of the organization just shut down, or would the work just kind of pile up into a queue and we could get to it whenever we get to it? Because everybody wants to think their job is important, and most of the time it is. Most of the time everybody's job is important, but then you also have the people who's, like I said, some people's jobs are like mission critical, and other people's jobs are kind of, those things that go along. It might build up into a queue, and eventually we will have to work that queue, but we'll be fine if it sits into a queue for a while.
Mm.
I guess I'm thinking back to my days again of incident management, where you have certain things that go down and people like, if that goes down, we can wait until in the morning. We're not waking anybody up for that, right? There are other things that go down, right? And you have an obligation, right? Your SLA is telling you if it goes down, it has to be back up in 60 minutes.
Mm.
So, or 90 minutes or whatever that is. So there's a difference
Non-functional
between,
requirements.
huh?
I said non-functional requirements.
Right, right. Well, it may be non-functional, but it may also be regulatory. So,
Mhm. Yep.
so, some of those non-functional requirements are still at the top of the list, whether they're, whether it has to do with functionality or, well, it, if you have regulatory stuff, that comes first. That's just how that goes. Um, so what I'm saying is that when you start digging into whether something is mission critical or not, you get a lot of good information as well.
Mhm. Yep.
Mhm.
And because the things they'll start spilling out, if you allow them to speak and not speak for them. Um, they'll start spilling out like who they engage, and if if you're dealing with vendors or and what the goal of those vendors when you do your handoff or collaboration, um, what logistically needs to be in place in order for you to function. Those are process and interconnectivity type of questions that will get them to, you know, uh, pour their hearts out, so to speak. And as a reminder to this, also, we have to um, watch out for when we're stuck in a question. If you have to repeat it 2 or 3 times, this person does not understand. So they're not going to share anything with you, because the more you ask them, try to reframe it, after the third time, is either you're not explaining it right, hopefully you vetted your questions out with your team, or um, they just don't have that answer and there's somebody else.
Right, but
And
even that is valuable information. Even
Yes,
that's valuable information, because if you're asking the person that you were told should have the answer and that person does not have the answer, that's important to know. Okay. It's important to know. And like you said, it is also important to note that if the person if they don't have the answer after like the second or third time you explain what you're after, you got to be careful, because sometimes people will, in their attempt to be helpful, sometimes people will almost like start to make up information so that they have something to tell you, because a lot of people are not
that
comfortable
is
with
true.
saying,
That is so true.
they're not comfortable with saying I don't know. So you have to be careful. And if somebody is giving you that whole deer in headlights look, it's cool. You just quickly make a transition and say, you know what, don't even worry about it, let's move on, because I don't
Boom.
want
There
to
you go.
time. Huh?
That's exactly what I was going to say. You took the
Yeah.
words out of my mouth. Just move on.
Yeah, let's just move on. Don't even worry about it, because it must, and in their mind, you also have to think about it too a little bit further. If you're asking this person the question and that's the person who's supposed to know and they don't know, that not only does it tells you that if they don't know and they do their job every single day and they don't know the answer to that question, then whatever that function is that you are asking questions about is probably being ignored in some way.
Or it's just me that understands that information, and who can give, if they don't know, then who can give me this information?
Right.
Who would you suggest that I go to in order to, that you may think would probably have this information?
Yeah. Yeah. We can certainly ask that. Normally people will offer that information, but even if they don't even offer that, that's also something else. That's important to note, because they may not know who does that function, and you may be going to, like, you may have been pointed in the completely opposite direction of the people that you need to go and speak to. I've had that happen a few times where I've gone to some people, scheduled a meeting, gone into the meeting, stated the purpose, and the people looked at me like, but we don't do that. We don't even know what that is.
You're like, wrong department?
I've had somebody say that, and I was like, no, this person said to come here. They were like, that person told you to come here? Yes.
Yeah.
And then they said, well, we don't know why that person thinks we do that, because that's not what we do. And then that the situation that you're in is much bigger than you thought it was, because there is information floating around that is just not so.
Yeah, or totally inaccurate.
Right.
And speaking of information, now not being accurate, a lot of the companies that I work for, or we had to do improvements on, whether it's federal government or public, I noticed that a lot of companies don't have good measurements or KPIs, and that is a very important question. if you're in that
That
type
is a
of
good
project,
question.
enhancing that data. Go
It
ahead.
is
What
a
did you
good
say?
question, Tony. I agree with you. It's a great question, but I will also agree with you when you say a lot of companies don't have them. The majority of the companies I've ever worked for did not have good KPIs. They
Mhm.
had numbers that they wanted to put into the yearly report that comes out. They had enough information for that. But
Volume data.
as far as departmental KPIs,
Mm.
nobody knew. Departmental KPIs were non-existent. That's common. Single points of failure is common. You know, if you're in software development, if you've ever spent any time in software development, the single point of failure is just a hideous thing and everybody is screaming. But you can also have single points of failure in process, not just with software algorithms, but also process things that people are actually doing, moving around pieces of paper that go from here to there. That's also a thing, but it is common. So
You
it's,
know,
I'm sorry.
and since we're on, like, we're dealing with these specific uh, topics about data and process, is something that came to mind while you were speaking. And one of the things that, how we understand, RPA, robotics, right?
Mhm.
So some of the questions that, like, and this is for all the RPA heads out there that are into, a robotic process automation. And speaking of KPIs,
Mhm.
if you're engaging and assessing your area, and some of the main questions, one of the questions that you will want to ask when you're doing your data collection is, how manual is this activity? Can a human activity be process mapped to
Mhm.
where it's the same repetitive process each time you do it?
Mhm.
Those are important, open-ended questions. Oh, yes, no, that's a yes or no, but now explain to me the process, right?
Right,
And
right,
then it becomes open, right?
right, right,
Well, go
right.
ahead. You're gonna say
No,
something?
no, I was going to say I think you hit something on the head, because this is another thing I like to do during interviews. A lot of people, it's kind of a mixture of two different techniques. It's like interviewing and kind of like um, I don't know what to say, but you know how when you go into a lot of organizations, they don't even have their processes mapped out. So I do
Yeah.
a lot of process mapping while I'm in my interviews, because I don't want to have to go back and forth over email saying, okay, is this right? Is that no, 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 no. I want to go in a room. This is part of the preparation that we were saying we weren't going to really talk about today. But I want to go in a room full of whiteboards and markers, and I want to start drawing out, this is what happens. So it's either I draw out the data, because it depends on what the project is, how the data moves from one place to another, or I talk about how the process goes from one stage to the next. Some people inadvertently combine those two. They combine the data mapping with the process mapping, but you can actually extrapolate them from each other. But I like to start with the process and how you go from point A to B to C, and then it has to go, through this door over here, around the corner, up the stairs, and wherever it has to go. I like to do all of that, and I like to do that
Hold,
because I'm
hold
sorry.
on, before you hit the because part, I just wanted to touch on something. And, like, soon as you hear, oh, this is how our process looks, sometimes if you just want to capture some high level information, jump on that whiteboard. And that's
Yes,
something, like, I get excited when they be like, really? Well, so you have this process work like what?
yeah,
Oh, well, because I don't understand it. And let's get on this whiteboard and let's
yes,
go it out. So you
yeah,
said
because
start
when they say You're right, because when they say that, now you know that there are conditions, right?
Mhm.
The process only works like this under condition A. But if condition B is in play, then the process works like this, okay?
Mhm.
And when you start capturing those conditions, like you said, a lot of the times the bottlenecks become obvious, the single points of failure become obvious, the places where high numbers of errors occur become obvious, right? Because if you're doing a process map, you may end up with some loops, right? So people say, well, if this doesn't happen, we got to do it again. And if this doesn't happen, we got to do it again. So you end up with these loops and all this kind of stuff. And it's really interesting that when you are drawing those things out, I find that a large number of people have never really seen a process map before, a well-drawn process map before. And I've even had the pleasure, it was an absolute pleasure one time when a stakeholder just took the marker out of my hand and went up and started doing it. They're like, no, this is how we go. They got excited, you know, and that's what you want, because when you get somebody to take the marker out of your hand, they're telling you stuff. That's what you need. And when you get done, you take a picture of the walls and you've got your information.
Yeah. And it's really important that, like, when you're documenting these things and and going back to KPIs, that you understand how this department is measuring things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you have to get on the board, and when you're process mapping, you can kind of like identify, oh, so what data do you have to report on this volume of information that you receive, and like what is the frequency behind this, and how many of these do you receive, blah blah blah. But you want to start, and what is the timeline, in which you have to deliver the SLAs, right? Excuse my language, I said cursing is up, but and is it because of the regulation, like Annette said, that you have these measurements in place, and how do you know, Well, go ahead, you were going to say something.
I was going to say, I'm so glad you said that, because here's another great question. Not only what are your KPIs, here's the question. You're going to get some people to talk on this
I think
one.
I know where you're going.
Are your KPIs fair?
Come on.
Ask some people if their KPIs are fair. Ask them.
Yeah.
You're going to get a whole bunch of information if you ask them that, because people are going to say, well, we shouldn't be held to this standard because this thing over here affects us. It doesn't affect, they'll say it affects us more than it affects some other department, but they're not negatively impacted by those KPI numbers. We are. Okay. So now you start looking at how different, you start seeing some connections there again. You start seeing connections that are not on the org chart.
Well, let me give you an example of a scenario I had just like this, right? This is crazy. All right, so one department, like in my early BA days, they weren't measured by the KPIs for taking a case and sitting on it, and the turnaround time was not there. But the other team was measured by that KPI and turnaround time, and the thing is that they were impacted by the other group because they sat on it for 21 days before the other people got it. And they had to do it within 3 days. So that wasn't a fair KPI.
No. And then you start saying, well, why is it? Why do you sit on it for 21 days, but this other team only has it for 3? What is that the way it needs to be? Or does something need to happen so that this team can only sit on it for 5 days before to move on to a different place? Is there a bottleneck that's causing things to sit over there for that long? You know, is there a bottleneck, some single point of failure? What is it that's causing it to sit over there that long? So these are things that, and when you talk about these KPIs, it's not just for process sake, but it's also when you're talking about culture, right? Because unfair KPIs will affect the culture. Unfair KPIs will affect people's morale, right? If a company has a bad morale problem and you are doing some things to support a change management effort, you might find that these KPIs are badly implemented, or they're, you know, some things like that. So asking questions, KPIs, how long they've been in place, when was the last time anybody looked at maybe changing some of the numbers up, right? Sometimes the person who put those numbers in place doesn't even work there anymore. And how do we know that those numbers are even valuable or make sense anymore, right?
Yeah.
All of that. So those are excellent questions to get people to to get people talking, and to get them talking about the problem and not another person, right? I want to stress that real quick before we end, because time is getting late. But whenever you're asking questions, you always want to try to direct any sort of, if there are some negative feelings, and sometimes there are, right? And when you're trying to solve a problem, there's going to be some negativity somewhere. Someone doesn't feel good about something. That is going to happen. But you try to direct that at the thing that is broken and not at a person. So I just wanted to throw that in.
That's a good statement that you said, because, you know, we want to keep the focus on, like, how can we collaborate, not pointing the fingers, because such a supervisor is not a good supervisor. If we had to deal with that, that's a different story.
Right,
but,
right. And that can't, of course it can be true. Absolutely. Of course it can. But we want to make sure that we're not putting or you know, we have to be concerned about biases. We have to be concerned about asking the right questions. We have to be concerned about logical analysis. We have to be concerned about those things. So. And
let me know when this, you know, time box me, please. You know, we're getting close to time. The other things that I noticed that were great questions when you're dealing with initiatives, people who are, you know, doing workflows or software, if they're using a certain type of software and we're doing an initiative, how it's being used or whatever, is how are these employees trained on the current software or workflow or process? You need to understand that, oh, we only train once a year. So the rest of the year, you know, depending on the complexity of the software, the rest of the year, what takes place? Are there different processes within the software that you have to learn? And if it has something to do with regulations, you have to, certain business rules that drive a certain process, you know, are they trained to that? Oh no, we were only trained in the beginning when we first came into this department. We don't get training. We just look at SOPs or DLPs, you know, for our training. And so they really don't have it. And you'll notice that, and that all of that is, they'll start spilling the beans, and you'll get a lot of that stuff when you start talking to the people who do the work every day, right? You start going down to that level. And you know, just understand. And I'm gonna do, you know, my closing remark, and that in understanding all of this, when you're dealing with interviews, be strategic with your questions. You know, if you know an initiative, there's a problem statement for an initiative, then try to understand that initiative, and then go into the interview with questions that will help you, you know, drive some of the future questions or the future sessions that you have to schedule, brainstorming or observations, whatever you're doing. But make sure that you're strategic when you're interviewing in the initial part of a initiative or a project. Don't be the person that's just having an interview just to talk about whatever comes to your mind. Don't shoot from the hip. Don't be that.
Oh, no, we don't want to do that. No.
Go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with you on that. Don't do that. When you go into an interview, you should definitely have something in mind. Now, does it ever happen that somebody says something and your plan goes out the window? It's derailed because you find that there's a specific thing that you have to dig into or something like that? Yeah, sure, that happens. But you should definitely go into an interview with a plan. I agree.
Mm-hmm. So with that being said, we're very happy that you're with us for our first live YouTube broadcast on this video log. This is Tony and Annette, and I am really excited. And what we want to do in the future is also to show you like hands-on on a lot of what we're doing in the future. So, if we have to interview someone, let's do that. We're looking for those type of interactions, and this is for the everyday BA shop talk.
Yeah. So we should have said in the very beginning of the video that we changed up our format. We should have explained that. We should have said that we changed our recording sessions to once every 2 weeks, and then we will be doing them live so that we can have live interaction. People can ask us questions. Our intention is to have about 30 or 40 minutes of a topic at the beginning, and then have some time for some live Q&A towards the end. And so that is what our intention is right now. And that's what we want to put out there and provide value in that way, especially in the way where there's the live Q&A portion, because it's sometimes it's good to just have somebody to bounce some ideas off of, especially when you're trying to deal with the situation that may be occurring at work, like right now. So sometimes it's good to get other perspectives.
And this show is for you.
Yeah. This show is for the everyday BA, people who are out there doing the job every day. We're not famous, we're not rock stars, we're none of that. We're just out here doing
rock star at work.
Yeah, we might be rock stars at work, but we're just out here doing our jobs, and we are trying to contribute to the BA community and help everybody be a better BA. So thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next month. We will not be doing it in 2 weeks because that'll be too close to Thanksgiving. So we'll see you next month.
All right. See you later, Taiwo. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Ciao. That's a wrap.